everyone, and welcome to another edition of By Design Podcast, where we believe business should be run by design and not by chance. Today, I'm here with good friend Chris Edwards from Rettler Law Firm. I think there's more letters and more names to your firm that I can't really say. If you want to share with everybody the law firm you work with.
Sure. It's Reitler, Kalis, and Rosenblatt. Total mouthful of a name. You got it right. So that's...
Good enough, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, so you're out of New York City. And I guess, you did Harvard Law, and where'd you go undergrad? Were you?
Davidson, right down the road.
Okay, so Davidson, and born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina, but dealing with the New York acquisition scene.
Sure.
Well, it's good to have you. I mean, we met doing some of the entrepreneurial stuff, and so yeah, share, I guess, with everybody a little bit of what does an M&A lawyer do, and what does your day look like?
Sure. Well, the day, I'm glad because I'm with someone from By Design Advisors, because the day can be kind of undesigned depending on what's coming, like what crises happen. But it's basically start the day early. You got things to do, a couple of deals to negotiate, a couple of contracts you got to get out the door that day. And then, so that is half the day. The other half of the day is crises. Maybe, for example, there's a phone call between business people that didn't go well, or somebody's being terminated at a company being bought. Yeah. Some kind of bump in the road. So it's mainly half the day is organized, half the day is just trying to manage the chaos. So By Design Advisors is what we need, actually.
You need to do more by design. Would you say your mornings start out better, or is it the call at night, or you just never know?
Mornings start out pretty well. It's usually late afternoons, then things just kind of build up. But every day, when I look at the day, sometimes think ahead, oh gosh, what all is going to happen today? Yeah. By the end of the day, it all ends up well, because if you have a good team with you, and if you have clients you're happy working with, which I am, it all ends up well in the end.
Right.
But it makes it exciting, I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, it's good you have that attitude, because it's interesting, because we do a lot of work, and we've talked a lot on this podcast of using the DISC profile. And one of the third letters in DISC, S, is stabilizing, and high S is like very structured days, where lower S's don't mind their day being interrupted. And it's funny, when we look at attorneys, a lot of them are very high S's, and so they don't like that disruption, which probably wouldn't make them a good M&A lawyer.
Good point. And at least I'm an ISTJ, I'm Myers-Briggs, so it probably is parallels to that. I like organization, and I like but that's just
some structure. Yeah.
But to be, I think, any kind of job in any kind of professional services, there's going to be some kind of unplanned things. Yeah. And that's what so the structure, it involves lack of structure sometimes. So I think we try to work with it.
Right. Now, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but a typical deal that you guys work on, what are the kind of ranges that you guys like to do?
Sure. At least for me lately, it's been $60 to $150 million is kind of the range that I'm seeing. Yeah. But that's been the last couple of months. But as a firm, it can be anything from a couple million to $500 million, $750 million or so.
You're right.
But lower middle market, really.
Yeah. I'm sure there's probably a sweet spot that just can afford the fees or understand the fee structure that you guys fit into. Is there any particular industry that you guys focus on or service, or?
We're pretty open-ended in terms of what we do, but our client base a lot of them are tech startup companies that end up being sold. So a lot of tech companies go through M&A, and they've been working with them for years, so we do the deals for them. But we'll gladly do anything.
Right.
Keeps it interesting.
Yeah. One thing that struck me is, when I sold Advoco, I knew nothing about legal. You always hear about it, but you never really understand the role or whatever. And I think sometimes it's too late once you get in. And so you might want to talk about, if somebody is looking for an M&A lawyer, are there some things that you would recommend that they focus on, or do you see things that people spend too much time focusing on? I will say maybe major in the minors, but should be spending more time on?
Good point. To me, the main thing is does the person have experience? Are they capable of doing it? And if they're in any kind of firm, they're usually pretty capable of, they wouldn't be lasting in the firm if they were not capable of doing the work that they say they can do.
Right.
But is the price right? And do you like them?
Right.
Because you're going to be spending a lot of times with people you hire and other advisors too, not just lawyers.
Yeah.
So you got to like them.
Yeah. I mean, relationship, we used to always say at Advoco, if we can't drink with our clients or have a beer with them, then they're probably not going to be good clients because you're going to spend a lot of time with each other. And if you like being with them and you feel like they're open and honest with you, then you'll do more there.
Oh, agreed, completely.
Yeah. How do you guys go about finding leads, or how do you go about like finding clients? Do most of them find you guys, or are you active in certain entrepreneurial environments, or typically where do you go?
Oh, good question. For me, it's mostly word of mouth in that our world is the tech ecosystem in New York City and the Northeast mostly, but I mean, we're national too.
Yeah.
But if you just are in that ecosystem, people come to you, and it's kind of a two-way thing of people we like to work with will gladly approach, but they often come to us just because we've met them before or met them at an industry event or sponsored something they did, or there's usually some kind of prior connection. But word of mouth is the best of all, because very grateful if somebody says, hey, you should use Chris. I liked him.
Yeah.
I'm extremely grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, I know we kind of had that relationship when I met you. I think one of the things that always struck me about you and your work was you were so open to help people.
Thanks.
Because I think sometimes the attitude around lawyers is, I'm not going to share anything with you without a charge number or a billing number.
Totally.
And I know that maybe that's in certain legal realms, but I know the M&A world, you were more than willing to help. And I think through that's how we got to know each other. And then, when somebody was asking me about a particular situation, I'm like, hey, call Chris. I'm sure he'll help you. And I think it led something.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us too, no matter what the type of advisor, we're in the helping business. And like, if you look at my law school classmates, maybe a third of them went into public sector stuff, like truly helping refugees and stuff, but we're in the helping business too. It's helping companies and entrepreneurs get good deals for themselves and protect themselves and get things done. So we're all kind of helping in different ways.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because I guess legal is A, how do you protect yourself? And B, how to think a little bit differently. You want to talk about that because one of the things sometimes when we look at the legal profession, we think about just looking through contracts, dealing with what's in front of them. But a lot of times legal isn't what's in front of you. It's what have I not thought about? And are there some things that you could tell owners or entrepreneurs, like these are some things that you should focus on more that may not be written or said, but usually gets them in trouble?
Sure. The first thing, great point actually, and one of the main things that I see is things that aren't written or said, or when you're looking at doing a deal with somebody, whether it's an investor or a buyer. We've all done plenty of deals, all of us in this room.
Yeah.
Some of them have been with people that maybe weren't the best fit, really.
Right.
And I think doing a deal with somebody, similar to your lawyer or something, anybody who's going to invest in your company, you're going to be spending a lot of time with them too.
You're right.
And like, do you like them? Are they trustworthy? Are they fair people? And making sure somebody you do deal with is a good fit is critical, in that so many companies, they'll get a term sheet or something and they'll say, ooh, got a term sheet. And they're concerned it's the only one they're ever going to get. But that's not the case. Because like people from like Venture Atlanta, that you see them getting term sheet after term sheet. So basically be careful in who you do business with. And most people I've dealt with are totally fine, but you just want to make sure there's a good fit there.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you're right. I mean, I know when we got our first term sheet, we were giddy, right? Hey, somebody wants me, somebody likes me. And then, if it's not the right deal, you start thinking this might be the only person who's ever going to love me. And it's not the case.
Sure.
And so I think that's a great point, is to keep your options open and not take a bad deal.
Definitely. Oh, totally. And with tech companies that I work with too, or any kind of company too, if it's an early stage company that's growing, often the term sheets for an acquisition will come in after a couple of years, and the founder is obviously overjoyed. They'll think, wow, I've worked so hard. Look, there's a lot of money I'm going to get, so maybe I should just take this.
Yeah.
But then if they look at the scale their company's growing at, they can maybe sit back and wait for the right deal and make a lot more money too.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things we looked at with By Design was, when you think about valuations, the tech space is a little bit different in the front end because of the J curve, right? That we're paying for future earnings and so forth. But in its really a nutshell is people are paying for earnings or future earnings times some multiplier.
Sure.
And if they just wait a little bit, and I know our case, by us waiting 18 months, our valuation went up 3x just because we could get our earnings going. Like we were just getting started. And so I think that's a great point is even that first one is an educational process. Don't take it as an end all.
Oh, agreed completely. Definitely. And people who've sold companies too, like you've done, probably have a good sense of what's going to be a good deal and what's not, based on the totality of the circumstances too, not just the term sheet.
Yeah,
so.
It is funny because I think what happens, and I think some of the mistakes are people go into an acquisition and they think legal is going to solve all your problems, and they'll protect you and cover you, but in some cases, like you're right, is you may by waiting for the right terms or the right partner, you can get higher valuations, and so it all just becomes that orchestrated dance.
Agreed, definitely. And legal, I mean, we can definitely help. We'll definitely try our best to help people out. But so often just having the right earnings or something or being at the right time, being in the right industry can make all the difference too. So
yeah. Are there any, we call them green flags and red flags. Are there any, let's start with red flags. Like when somebody brings a deal to you, are there certain red flags that maybe people should be more aware of or they don't think about? Like, do you look for certain things right away for your clients?
Sure. One we got this week, actually, we're looking at, I mean, can't say any details of it, but liability. For me, we're kind of risk-averse people.
Yeah.
And sometimes a term sheet will say the price is this, and it'll say just very succinctly, all liabilities to be retained by the seller. And if you're selling your company, all your assets, all your stock or the like, and you personally are keeping all the liabilities,
yeah, that's not a good one.
Mm-hmm. Might want to try to adjust that.
Now, is that kind of hidden in the lines, or
it can be. Mm-hmm.
It's not really there, but
Definitely.
you're right. Is how can you maintain all the liabilities when? Now, I could see a buyer wanting to do that, but
Sure,
you know.
Oh, definitely, it makes it. I mean, great for the buyer. You're totally right because, I mean, they pay the cash, they get all the upside, but no liabilities. But then the seller gets cash, but then the company's stuck with skeletons in the closet and stuff. That's what can be a little rough. So
yeah. So how do you mitigate that? How do you, let's say a buyer wants you to take that, where is a midpoint or what would be a strategy to mitigate that other than just saying, no, we're giving you 100% of the liability. Mm-hmm. What's a mitigating strategy for that?
Oh, sure. Well, having the liabilities be retained by the seller before the closing is reasonable. But then the liabilities for post-closing for the assets or something, if it's an asset sale, be retained by the buyer if it's post-closing. That's reasonable. And having the representations and warranties last for a certain period but then end as quickly as possible is a good way to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up reps and warranty. That was a big issue in our contract when we sold. And I want to say the number was 15 to 18% of the deal paid over 1 year and 18 months. And at first, we fought, and I think we got the number down in half. But at the end of the day, we knew we ran a good business. We knew that if we got sued or something was out there, we would pay. So I think we ended up accepting some of those reps and warranties. And so I understand where they come from. A lot of people think they want zero, and is that realistic?
Not zero is a little, I mean, there's always some risk on both sides of a
Yeah.
deal. And I think zero, if I could get that, love it, but it's just not going to happen in most cases.
Yeah.
So I think, go ahead.
Do you see typically that it's then escrowed, or how do they typically handle reps and warranties?
It can be escrowed, sure.
Yeah.
Like identification is one way to handle it. Or my favorite thing of all is insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for M&A deals, so often if you can get representation and warranty insurance,
Okay.
if the price is right, that makes a lot of sense. And I really wish somebody could do insurance for other kinds of deals too, like venture capital financings. If they could insure those, that'd be great.
Yeah, I guess there's probably a little too much risk involved in that case. So those are sort of red flags. Are there anything that you typically see in a deal that that really show that the buyer is willing? Like, are there certain things that jump out at you? Like, wow, this is exciting. Like, this sounds like a good deal.
Sure. Well, any kind of financing you do or any kind of M&A deal, there's only so much variation from like the market norms. And what I've learned, if somebody says this is market, it just means this is what I want.
Yeah.
But there is some still like a general down the middle path for any kind of M&A deal or venture capital financing and the like.
Right.
And the closer you are to that, if someone in the first draft of a term sheet gives you a down the middle term sheet that doesn't stray too far from the norms, that's a good sign.
That's
really.
okay. So that would be a green flag that if they come in too hard early. When we had Shay Hauser on, and he called it the letter of non-committal. So everybody gets an LOI and they get all excited, but yet it's really just a letter of non-committal. And so, how much weight do you put in the LOI?
A pretty good amount. You're totally right. It is non-committal, although, and you can renegotiate the terms. Definitely, people do all the time. But if you've signed an LOI and then try to change something fundamental, that's just not something you try to do. Usually.
Yeah.
That's just bad form, really.
So would you say that's sort of a mistake on a seller thinking they'll accept an LOI too quick, thinking that they're going to change it later when in actuality they can't?
I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
Sure. And I've seen some people sign an LOI, if they're a seller, and the buyer says, hey, well, the LOI says this, but we're not going to actually do that.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, if it's a piece of paper that's been signed and has the term in there, then I would go with what the paper says, not the verbal assurance.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I know, and again, our deal, I took the LOI as an ending agreement. I mean, we worked really hard, probably harder than most, and I could tell the buyer was getting a little anxious, and even the lawyers, but I felt like if we didn't get this right and we didn't think through it, then if we did more work up front, it would be better in the end, which it did.
Definitely.
And I was glad we did it. But LOIs are really interesting documents.
Oh, agreed. And the approach you took is the right way to do it, too, because I see term sheets getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Even some these days, it's more on the venture capital side. They'll say, we'll buy 30% of your company for X amount of money, sign here. Well, I mean, great. It makes the term sheet easy to negotiate. Everybody's friendly because there's nothing contentious. But then when you get to the actual deal documents, then you have to argue about everything.
Yeah.
So the approach, the way you did it, of focus on the term sheet, get it right.
Right.
That's definitely the best approach to do. That's a very wise move.
Yeah. I think it's better to do everything up front, like, the open transparency, although, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, but I think it just gets important. And again, I think you made a really good point that LOI is setting the tone for what's going to happen. And if it's too simplistic,
agreed.
Something's up. If it's too complicated, something's up. So, is this a real fair and honest document?
Agreed. Definitely. And to your point about, is this too much? I've seen LOIs that are just almost like an encyclopedia, basically, maybe 10, 15 pages.
Yeah.
And if they're at that, usually, I mean, as a seller, you simply want to hand over your business and get money. So as a seller, it should be like one sentence, like, I'll pay $100,000 for your business, which is blank corporation.
Right.
The sign that's the ideal. If you've got 15 pages in a term sheet, it's usually because they're putting all sorts of conditions on you.
Right.
So I agree. If it can be too much.
Yeah. So looking at that back I think sets a tone for how it's done. Are there any other, like, again, one of the things I noticed, like you made a comment, like, lawyers tend to be very detailed, very risk adverse. Obviously, dealing with entrepreneurs, we're on the other side of the spectrum. We're like, let it fly. How do you find working, with the entrepreneur to get them to slow down? Because I'm sure they're trying to make fast decisions and that kind of stuff. How does that tend to work?
Well, when somebody picks me to be their lawyer, I'm very grateful for it. And I want to help them. I want to protect them, help them, but also want to help them make money. I want to help them get stuff done. And I want to find a way to help them do the deal, help them make money as quickly as they can. I want to advise them about these problems they can have. Or, they'll come to me and say, hey, here's a term sheet or something. What are the pros and cons here?
Right.
I'll lay out all the flaws, all things that can go wrong. Sometimes people don't want to hear it, but I'm grateful for the trust people put in me. So I want to be upfront with them and say, here's the pros, here's some cons, just be aware, here's what we can do to address that.
Yeah.
And I'll advise them, and I'm grateful that they take the advice. I'm grateful they listen, but it's up to the entrepreneur to make the decision about what to do.
Right.
And so what I really appreciate is if I tell them something based on my professional experience and they listen and they follow it, I'm really grateful. But even if they don't, I can respect that they're on the front lines negotiating. They're the ones who are going to be dealing with a buyer or something. I can tell them what the contract says or what my experience has been. But if they listen to me and then say, hey, I appreciate that, Chris, but based on this, I'm going to do something else, I can respect that too because they have the full information on the front line. So.
Right. Well, I think we talk about the disc profile, and I mentioned S. Like one of the other things is on the D for disc is how fast you make decisions. So high Ds make very quick decisions, which I am, and I really want to get to the point quicker. Where a lower D will take their time, and so based on kind of that person, I think it's fair to say, here's my assessment, here's what I believe. And then what we looked at, and it was a theory that came out of W.L. Gore, they called it the waterline. And they always said, if it's above the waterline, it can sink the boat. We need to take more care in that versus it's below the waterline, it can't sink the deal. You may want to know about it, but we don't have to worry about it. And so I think sometimes we have to kind of, as entrepreneurs, our lawyers need to tell us, can this sink me or is this above or below? I don't, do you kind of get into that?
That makes sense. And some people too, to that point, they'll send us a contract to look over and they'll say, send me an issues list. They don't want to hear that the formatting's wrong. They don't want to hear that, and that doesn't matter anyway, but they don't want to hear that maybe there's some kind of provision that's some arcane legal thing. They shouldn't care about some of the things.
No.
That's for me to care about. But they'll say, give me the 5 things in this contract. What can really hurt me?
Right.
We'll tell them that. And that's the most efficient anyway.
Yeah. It was interesting. I had another buddy who just sold his company. And what was interesting is they did the LOI, they got into due diligence, and then they looked to another party around taxes. And basically, they were afraid of tax exposure to other countries, and they want them to hold like 25% of the deal for taxes. Yeah, wow. And I think what happens sometimes is the buyer wants to be cautious, so they want to hold escrow. To me, if you're holding my money and you don't care, then you might be writing checks you don't need to be writing. And he had called for advice, and I said, in this kind of case, I would push back and find out through the legal, like, what are we legal for or what's the right answer? And at the end of the day, it turned out to be like 3 to 4%, but he pushed back. Like this was a watermark line. And so I think those are the things people need to be looking at their team for help and understanding, not either A, just taking it at face value, or B, being afraid to push back.
Sure, that makes sense actually. And to your point about what's within a market range or the like, there's so many books out there too that came out. There's one that even brought with me actually. It's the like this deal term survey.
Oh yeah,
SRS Acuum. These things are great. They tell you, like, they actually list out what are the market norms in a deal actually.
Oh wow, I guess we could show if you could see this, but that's pretty cool. Like, so this is sort of deal norms and deal strategies.
Sure, and there are plenty of things out there on the internet too that people can look at themselves. I mean, we're happy to tell based on our experience, and we'll even look at guidebooks too.
Yeah, and
look at deals we've done to get typical deal terms. But there's so much information out there that it should be pretty easy to get.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting that if you do your homework, I guess you could say AI won't replace your lawyer because it can't replace common sense and knowledge, but it can open you up to new ideas.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. And agreed. I mean, AI can be useful too, definitely. And I mean, there are plenty of legal industry programs that use AI too. It's definitely useful, but it's not there yet to be able to give you fully thought out, careful input based on someone's professional experience.
Right.
So it's helpful to have.
So speaking of AI, we kind of opened that subject, which is always interesting. How have you seen AI affect your business positively, negatively? Like, how are you guys seeing that play out?
I think it's a huge help, actually, in that the companies you work with more on the tech side, well, basically, any business that incorporates AI heavily correlates to growing quickly or growing faster than the norm. And then any company that is AI focused is going to be an easier path to investment for it.
Right.
And so I think AI in general has helped our client base tremendously just by helping them grow and helping them get investments more easily. And in terms of professional services business, I think it helps too in that it'll make jobs that can be automated. I mean, it'll make those.
It's the word processor to me.
Sure.
You know, yeah. I mean, it did kill a certain level of typewriting and secretarial work, but yet, is that really where value add is?
Oh, agreed, totally. And the things that it will take away, for example, due diligence in an M&A deal.
Yeah.
There's so many programs like eBrevia's one. There are a bunch of online programs, or law firms use them. Basically, I think they're wonderful because you could take like a data room, drop it into an AI program, and this AI program will review everything for you and do a diligence list, and it'll generate work product for it. It'll do diligence quickly and accurately. And people always have to check it over, but it takes the jobs that can be automated and just frees up our day to do more productive stuff.
Right.
So I think AI is great.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because you always hear this, AI is taking over the world. It's going to kill everything, but it still can't think. It still can't act in, changing times, but it can give you baseline. It can find certain things. So it's interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, and agreed. And AI too, I think it's just going to help people overall in that even around Greenville, there are plenty of tech companies that are AI-focused companies. And so it's going to create jobs in the long run, I think. I mean, I'm sure there's data out there that says it, but overall, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. So I want to change kind of direction a little bit. When they talk about deals, you probably have three types of deals, right? You have a strategic buyer, you have a private equity buyer, and then you might have sort of a family transfer. Talk about how those three are different, or what have you seen within those three deals? Like, are some easier, harder, or what do you typically?
Sure. Well, strategics, I like all of them have their pros and cons. Strategics I like too because, well, starting with in the middle here, because if you have a company that's being bought by a strategic, often they've been doing business for so long with each other that it makes it easier to do that. Family transfer, that is interesting too because you have a lot more emotional attachment by the owner, like rationally. Yeah. And a lot of those companies have been around for so long that there's a lot of getting them ready for an M&A deal too.
Right.
And then like a typical private equity purchase, often those are done and then they'll do another one in a few years.
Right.
And so what I like about those is the high level professionalism of the buyers too.
Right.
So, I mean, they're pros at just buying companies.
Yeah. So, it is interesting because, I was acquired by a strategic, and in that they were experts. It's like a machine, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And through that process, they kind of just want to bundle you back in. You get a little bit higher valuation. I don't think there's many details. When we looked at private equity, and the more I see private equity, I'm impressed by, like you said, the quality of the people. In the very knowledgeable, they're much more knowledgeable than I think strategics are. Agreed. But they're also protecting themselves. And then the third one, which do you do many family deals? Like, do you see that transfer, or is that okay?
Sometimes, and often those are they're non-AI companies or not tech companies, but they'll be maybe someone started an electronics company 40 years ago and is selling it now, or somebody just has a business that took off and did well. Even I've seen a bunch of industries that, like electronics, have been some just arranged, but they're not like AI, like .ai kind of companies.
Yeah.
But I like those, and often we see somebody who's really poured their heart into a company for 40 years or something, approaching retirement age, but not ready to retire.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate in those is, mean, somebody knows the business inside and out because they founded it 40 years ago, and they truly are just their heart's in it, which
Yeah.
I love. It's so wonderful to see.
I guess so. Sometimes they're letting go is probably the hardest thing.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of interesting because as we got into the SEPA, which is Certified Exit Planning, one of the statistics that came out that said 80% of all businesses never transact. And it's kind of interesting because when you're in the high-tech world, it's almost based upon transactions, but long-term family businesses, service companies, manufacturing, a lot of them they never transact because the owner is never ready. They never really think about what's next until something happens that forces it, whether it's death, divorce, distress, or, something else happens in life. And so to me, do you see people coming to you from a planning standpoint, or do you see too many people coming like, I need your help right now?
Right now.
Right now.
And if I can recommend one thing to a founder or to a company owner, they should do exit planning. They should at least talk to somebody in the exit planning field, they should talk to you, frankly.
Yeah.
Because we see people, so often a term sheet comes quickly, unexpectedly, and then not only do you have to spend time getting the company ready, but you have to get yourself personally ready for it too with your own financial situation. And if people would even just take the time to meet somebody in the exit planning space, even just every now and then, it would help them so much, actually. It would save them money, make the process easier. That's the number one thing I would tell a founder.
Yeah.
Very seriously, talk to Marty, talk to anybody in the exit planning space. Just do it. It'll save a lot of money, save a lot of headache.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm glad you share that in the recommendation, because it's kind of why we got into it. And I even know that I'd never thought about selling my business, never did. And I had a buddy, and he looked at me and said, "Would you ever sell your company?" And I was like, "No. Why would I want to sell it? I'm going to die here." And he goes, "I mean, wouldn't you want to just at least listen?" And I'm like, "Well, should I?" And he's like, "Yeah, you should listen." I said, "All right, I'm going to listen if somebody offers." I swear a month after I did it, I got a phone call. It said, "Would you sell your business?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll listen." But I still was way underprepared because I had that mindset like I was never going to do this, as opposed to it is an option on the table. And probably if I would have done that, I could have done better, or at least probably would have known more what's going on.
I hear and see founders saying the same thing too, in that the term sheets often are unexpected, and maybe it's on the back of their mind, but so often they'll meet somebody at a conference or just meet somebody on the golf course or something, turns into a term sheet, turns into selling the company.
Yeah.
And it just comes at you like a freight train, really. That's what I hear. So
yeah, and then you either A, get so caught up in it that you stop running your business, or B is you go too fast because you want to, again, as entrepreneurs, we don't like diversions, and we want to make quick decisions. And it seems like the faster we make a decision, probably the worst decision we make. And so my guess is you're probably spending a lot of time getting the entrepreneur to slow down.
At least to slow down to get it right too.
Yeah.
And like, for example, if you've been running a business for even 10 years and then you suddenly get a term sheet and then suddenly you're having the all hands calls for diligence.
Yeah.
If your company is not ready and, for example, doesn't have books and records in order, doesn't have clear corporate records, and the founder hasn't gone through financial planning and other exit planning for the founder, that's a lot coming at you at once too.
Right.
And I've seen deals not happen just because they got the term sheet was great, they wanted to do the deal, but when they started doing the deal, they realized nobody was ready at all. They needed to take a time out and just start over. So I've seen that happen. So exit planning is something that everybody ought to be doing.
Yeah, one of the things, we put together a checklist for people that if they were looking at this, what do they need from a record standpoint? We also work with companies, what we call the readiness assessment and then attractiveness, because sometimes we see owners that eventually want to sell, but they believe like they're the hero of the story. So they think that they're involved, they do every deal, and they're very proud of it, when in actuality, that's hurting the deal, because in the acquisition, the owner's going to go away. Well, who's going to be left to run the business?
That makes total sense. Agreed. And so often in a company too, a good CFO or a good lieutenant can do a really good job managing a deal too. So.
Yeah, which they need to. And what we found was, like you said, the data room. I mean, you get an LOI, and once you sign it, it's almost like game on. Like it is, do you have your information? Do you have your finances? Do you have all your employment and all your contracts? Like it can get overwhelming.
Oh, definitely. And for a founder too of a company to have been running the company for maybe 5 or 10 years, and then suddenly go from typical day job to suddenly getting an LOI, then suddenly you have like 30 people on a Zoom call from a public company diligencing you, and you're kind of on the front lines with that. It can be pretty intimidating too, I would think. So being prepared with like a list of records you need and exit planning is critical, I think.
Yeah. I think the only thing that saved me was my business partner, Steve, was a high C, high detail person. So he loved the data room. Like he nailed that stuff. It would have crushed me if I had to do it without it. And so planning to have somebody who's there to help you, like you said, a CFO is big. Sort of the last topic, and this one I hear a lot about, and I think when we start thinking about people taking money, and it feels like the more we're in the entrepreneurial community, everybody thinks the gold standard is taking money. But yet, what somebody told me was the 3 F's: friends, family, and fools. And they take money and they don't understand cap tables. They don't understand how that going to affect the deal. You want to talk a little bit about the cap table or things you see or best practices in that area?
Sure. I think best practice to tie in your remark about records, having those in order. If you have a company and your cap table is not clear, and a sign of that is often, maybe if you've been managing your own cap table and you have it on Excel, that's great. But basically, any cap table, when they're doing diligence, they're going to want to see, like, who's the stockholder, what's the document of their stock purchase, like, is there a purchase agreement that they signed themselves, is there a stock certificate? Every entry on the cap table should have backup for that. And if you've been promising stock to people, that should be documented and disclosed. In that, if you've been promising somebody 10 years ago, you said, hey, I'll give you 5% of the company.
Yep.
Then last year you said, I'll give another person 10% of the company. If you have all these promises, they can overlap, and you have competing claims in your company. That can really be a mess in a deal. So I would definitely just have your cap table clear before you start the process, and get on Carta or something too, one of those cap table programs. That's a good way to do it too.
Okay. So, I mean, it just feels like in the early night, and when somebody told me the 3 F's, was that a lot of people just think in the early days they're going to take money, like you said, I'll give you $50,000 from friends and family, and I'll give you 5%. But they don't realize, is that diluted? I can't even say the word. What is the word?
Diluted.
Diluted.
Sure, got it.
Or do they follow that process? And again, I hear more and more about deals getting blown up because the cap table is all messy.
And I've definitely seen it happen too. And apart from having a clear cap table, like with every entry having a stock certificate and a purchase document below it, if you've given somebody a right, like a right not to be diluted that lasts forever, that's going to be a problem. Like any permanent right you give to an investor, especially if it's some informal thing you drafted yourself and signed yourself, it's going to be a problem.
So big red flag is if you when you do give money or take money for stock and you don't allow that stock to be diluted, and you're not, then that's almost a deal breaker, it seems like.
Definitely. And then one thing I've seen too is if you buy stock, especially if you're a founder, get your stock certificate early on, because if your company qualifies for small business QSBS, qualified small business stock treatment, if you don't have a stock certificate or evidence that you got the stock years ago, it can be a huge tax bill.
Wow, yeah. So people, So, I mean, it actually, I think it's funny as we start these companies, we don't realize the little things. While we don't think we need a lawyer, we really need some advice there to help us along.
Well, thanks. I fully agree. And I think every company, in my view, ought to have a good accountant, a good lawyer, hopefully, and a good other advisors too.
Yeah.
like a good financial advisor and a good exit planner. That team of people. Every advisor is worth their weight in gold, I think, especially if they can help you with financial stuff.
Right. Well, that's good. Well, any other thing? This was great. We could probably go on forever, but any other last things like if to share with an entrepreneur or any other Chris words of wisdoms or any other thoughts?
Sure. I think my thought is in closing, if you're a founder of a company, it's worth the time just to even meet like a good accountant, a good exit planner, just meet other professionals, just have a good network of those people who can come help you out when they need to.
Yeah. And it's funny, I think just as you said that, I kind of think about is reach out and meet these people. The one thing I found about this industry is people love to help other people. They don't want to see people get burned. And so the more you reach out, the more questions you ask. I know it was invaluable to me when I was going through it, just tapping into my network of friends. But I think that's great advice.
Thanks.
Well, Chris, it was great having you. And it's great, getting you to talk to the By Design people. And we're excited for the work you're doing. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Sure. On LinkedIn, it's Christopher Edwards. But email is cedwards@reitlerlaw.com, REITLER law.com, or phone number is 212-209-3072. Always happy to talk.
Yeah, look at that, giving it away. I think it's great. I think if you have any questions, I know, Chris, you've always been helpful to people, and you never know how it's going to pay itself forward. So it was good having you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, Chris.
Likewise.
Bye.